I left Rockhampton with one bag. I built a life they never saw coming. I want to share my story, much like the people who post here have done. I can't thank my local library enough for being the place where I first started figuring my future out, and I can't thank the people who posted here enough for reminding me that the tools were always there. Here is my story. My name is Tegan. I'm 32 years old. I live in Brisbane, Australia, in a two-bedroom unit I own in the inner north. I work as an occupational therapist under the NDIS. I have a caseload of clients I genuinely care about, a salary that lets me live well, and a life I built entirely on my own terms from a town that did not expect much from me. I want you to know where this ends before I take you back to where it started, because where it started looks nothing like this. I grew up in Rockhampton, Queensland, Rocky as everyone calls it, about 600 kilometres north of Brisbane, sitting on the Fitzroy River. It is not a bad place. I want to say that the same way I mean it, not as a disclaimer but as a fact. There are good people in Rocky, hard-working people who love their families and their town and have no desire to be anywhere else. But it is also a place where the statistics are not kind. High unemployment, lower than average education attainment, a significant number of young people who finish school and do not know what comes next, and so they do what is in front of them. Some of them drift, some of them stay and make something of it, a lot of them just stay. My parents, Sharon and Dale, were not people who had ever thought much beyond Rocky. My mum worked at the hospital in the administration office for 20 years. My dad drove machinery on a cattle property 40 minutes out of town. They worked hard and they came home and they did it again. There was love in our house. There was also a complete absence of any map for anything beyond what was immediately visible. I have a younger brother, Lachlan, who is 3 years behind me. He is the sibling piece of this story, and I will get to him. My friend group from school was the centre of my world from about age 12. There were 5 of us: me, Brittany, Kayla, Renee, and Steph. We did everything together. Footy games on Friday nights, the riverbank on weekends, complaining about Rocky while having absolutely no plan to leave it. We were a unit. That unit felt permanent in the way things feel permanent when you are 16 and cannot imagine a life that looks different from the one in front of you. I was 17 when I started to imagine one. It started with my Nan. Nan Joyce had a stroke when I was in year 11. She recovered partially, but her right side was weakened, and she struggled with things she had done easily her whole life: dressing herself, making a cup of tea, writing. The hospital arranged for an occupational therapist to come to her house twice a week to work with her on regaining those functions and adapting her home environment so she could stay independent. The OT's name was Michelle. She was maybe 30, calm and practical and specific in the way she worked. She did not talk down to my Nan. She explained everything she was doing and why. She brought equipment and tried things and adapted when they didn't work. She asked my Nan what mattered most to her, what she wanted to be able to do, and built the whole program around those answers. I watched Michelle work with my Nan for about 3 months. I watched my Nan go from frustrated and frightened to competent and confident again. I watched a person get their life back in small, careful increments because someone else had the knowledge and the patience to help them do it. I wrote in my notebook that night, "Occupational therapy. What is it? How do you become one?" I took the notebook to the library the next day. The Rocky Library was not large, but it had internet access and a librarian named Mr. Patterson who had the specific quality of knowing where everything was and never making you feel stupid for asking. He told me I wanted to find out about occupational therapy as a career. He showed me where to look. What I found was a path that was longer than I had hoped and more possible than I had expected. To become a registered OT in Australia, you needed a bachelor's degree in occupational therapy, a 4-year program, or a master's entry-level program for graduates in other fields.
The main Queensland universities offering it were the University of Queensland in Brisbane and James Cook University in Townsville. There were prerequisite subjects required for entry: health sciences, biology, some psychology. I also found TAFE Queensland, the Technical and Further Education System, a pathway that could let me complete the prerequisites I was missing and build a foundation for university entry. It was real, it was affordable, it was 40 minutes from my house. I wrote all of it down, every step, every institution, every subject I would need. I made a list of what I had and a list of what I still needed, and I looked at the gap between them and thought, that is closable. The other thing I found was HECS-HELP, the Australian Government's Higher Education Loan Program. I would not need money I did not have to start. The debt would come out of my income gradually once I was earning above the repayment threshold. I wrote that down and underlined it twice. I showed the pages to my mum that night. She looked at them for a while, then she said it was a long way to go to university. I told her Brisbane was 6 hours by car. She said that was a long way from home. I told her I knew. My dad said if I wanted to work in healthcare, there were jobs at the hospital in Rocky. I said I wanted to be an OT specifically. He nodded slowly, like he was hearing a word in a language he almost understood. Brittany told me I was mad. She said it like it was funny. She said, "Who goes to Brisbane?" I said I was going to try to. She laughed and said good luck, and meant it warmly, and I do not think it occurred to either of us that in 3 years we would be living completely different lives. I finished Year 12 with a score that got me into the TAFE Health Sciences pathway. I enrolled at CQ University TAFE in Rockhampton, completed my Certificate 3 in Health Services Assistance while I finished the prerequisite subjects for university entry. I worked part-time at the Coles in the Stockland Centre, 3 or 4 shifts a week, and saved everything I could. I lived at home and paid my parents a small amount for board because I would not accept living for free, even though they told me to. I studied in a way I had never studied in high school, not because I was suddenly smarter, because I had finally understood that studying was a skill and I had been doing it badly. I found resources online about active recall and spaced repetition. I started making proper notes, not just highlighting, actually writing things out in my own words until I understood them. I formed a study routine and I stuck to it even when I didn't want to. My results were strong enough to receive an offer from the University of Queensland for the Bachelor of Occupational Therapy program. I accepted it the same day the offer arrived. I told my friends over drinks at the Criterion on a Friday night. Brittany said she was happy for me. Renee said she always knew I would do something like this. Steph was quiet for a moment and then said she was going to miss me. Kayla asked if Brisbane boys were better looking than Rocky boys and made everyone laugh. It felt like a good send-off. It felt like the kind of night you remember. What I did not fully understand yet was that it was also a beginning of an ending, not dramatic, not sudden, just the slow and inevitable drift that happens when people's lives stop moving in the same direction. I moved to Brisbane 2 weeks before semester started. I found a room in a share house in Toowong, close to the UQ campus, $480 a month including bills, shared with 3 other students. I transferred my Coles job to a store in Indooroopilly and worked 2 or 3 shifts a week through my degree. The degree was hard, not impossibly hard, but genuinely demanding in a way that required everything I had. The clinical placements were intense. I was in hospitals, community health centres, schools, aged care facilities, private practices. I worked with children with developmental delays, adults recovering from strokes, elderly people trying to maintain independence, people with mental health conditions, people with spinal injuries. Every placement showed me a different dimension of what the work could be. I was good at it, not because I was naturally talented at everything, but because I actually wanted to be there. That matters more than people think. Lachlan had finished school by the time I was in my second year. He got a job at the meatworks. It was decent money for Rocky, and he seemed fine with it. We talked on the phone occasionally. My friend group had mostly settled into Rocky life by then. Brittany was working at a real estate agency and had a boyfriend. Renee was doing a business administration certificate. Steph had a kid and was working part-time at a childcare centre. Kayla was working at a hair salon and seemed genuinely happy. Good lives. Real lives. Just not lives that had any overlap with the one I was building. When I came home for Christmas in second year, I felt the gap for the first time, not in a cruel way, in a factual one. We went to the Criterion the same as always, and the conversation was the same as always, and I sat there feeling like I was visiting somewhere I used to live rather than coming home. I was not better than them. I want to be clear about that because it would be easy to read it that way and it would be wrong. They were living the lives they had chosen. I was living the life I had chosen. The discomfort was not superiority. It was the specific loneliness of outgrowing a place you love. Nan Joyce was still going strong at 81. She asked me about my studies every time I saw her. She told everyone at her bowls club that her granddaughter was going to be an OT. She said it with a pride that made my throat tight every time. I graduated from UQ at 23 with a Bachelor of Occupational Therapy. I registered with the Australian Health Practitioner Regulation Agency as a registered occupational therapist. I had a job offer before I graduated, a private OT practice in Brisbane working primarily with NDIS participants. The NDIS, the National Disability Insurance Scheme, had been rolling out across Queensland, and the demand for registered OTs was enormous and growing. The scheme funds supports for Australians with permanent and significant disability, and occupational therapy is one of the most commonly funded supports. There were not enough OTs to meet the need. There still aren't. Starting salary, $62,000 plus superannuation. I accepted without hesitation. I moved out of the share house and into a one-bedroom apartment in Newstead. I bought second-hand furniture and a good coffee maker, and I stood in that small, clean space on my first night and felt something I'd been working toward for years settle into place. I called Nan Joyce. She cried. She said, "You went and did it, love." I told her she was the reason I knew what an OT was. She said that was Michelle's doing. I said it was hers. The NDIS work was unlike anything I had done in placement. The caseload was complex and varied. I worked with children who had autism, adults with acquired brain injuries, people with physical disabilities trying to navigate homes and workplaces not designed for them. I wrote reports, conducted assessments, recommended equipment and home modifications, ran therapy sessions, attended planning meetings, advocated for clients who did not know how to advocate for themselves. I loved it, even the hard days, even the paperwork. I earned my full NDIS provider registration in my second year. My practice director, a woman named Fiona, who'd been in OT for 20 years, told me after my second performance review that I was one of the strongest new graduates she had supervised. She asked where I wanted to be in 5 years. I told her I wanted to run my own caseload independently and eventually move into a senior clinician role. She said, "Then let's make that happen." I was promoted to senior OT at 27. My salary had grown to $88,000. I also built a life in Brisbane, friends from university, friends from work, a running group along the river on Saturday mornings, a life that was full in the specific way that comes from building something intentionally over time. I dated. I was choosy in a way I hadn't been when I was younger, and I make no apology for that. I bought my unit at 29, 2 bedrooms in the inner north, a balcony, good light, walking distance to the shops and the river. I closed on a Thursday afternoon and stood in the empty living room and felt the full weight of what I had built. From Rocky, from a library table and a notebook and a list of questions I didn't yet have answers to. All of it mine. Lachlan called me the year I turned 30. He had been at the meatworks for 8 years. Something had shifted in him, and I could hear it in his voice before he said a word of what he actually called to say. He'd been telling people for years, quietly, that the reason I had done well was because I was the older one, that I had gotten out first, that if he had left when I left, he would have done the same, that the difference between us was timing and luck and nothing more.
I had heard it secondhand from my mum. I had let it go because I did not want the fight, and because part of me understood it was easier for him to believe that than to sit with the alternative. But on the phone that night, he said it directly. He said, "You got out at the right time. I had to stay and help Mum and Dad." I asked when he had helped them financially. He was quiet. I said, "Look, I have been sending Mum $200 a month for 3 years. You live 10 minutes away." He said that wasn't the point. I asked what the point was. He said, "You always had it easier. You were always the favourite." I took a breath. I said, "I worked at Coles for 4 years while I studied. I lived in a share house with 3 strangers. I did 4 years of the hardest degree I have ever encountered, and I came home exhausted, and I got up and I went back. Nobody paid for it for me. Nobody smoothed the path. I just walked it." He said I had always been smarter than him. I said that was not true, and he knew it. I said, "The TAFE in Rocky is still there, Locke. HECS still exists. You could start tomorrow. I will help you figure out the path. I will answer every question you have. But I am not going to sit here and let you tell yourself a story about luck that lets you off the hook for 8 years of choosing not to try." He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "I wouldn't even know where to start." And just like that, the conversation changed. I spent an hour on the phone with him that night. I told him about the Certificate 4 pathway through TAFE. I told him about community services and disability support work as an entry point into the sector. I told him about HECS and how it worked. I told him about the free study skills resources I had used. I told him none of it required money up front. It required time and commitment and the willingness to give up some evenings. He said he would think about it. 6 months later, he enrolled in a Certificate 4 in disability at TAFE Queensland. He called me the night he got his confirmation email. He sounded like a different person, lighter somehow. He is in his 2nd year now. He calls me when he gets stuck and I help him work through it. He is not me. He is doing it his own way, on his own timeline, but he is doing it. That is enough. My friends from Rocky are still my friends in the way that old friendships survive distance. We catch up when I'm home. We have a group chat that is mostly memes and the occasional life update. Brittany got married last year and I went to the wedding and danced until midnight, and it was genuinely one of the best nights I have had in years. But we are not close in the way we once were, and that is just true. We love each other from a distance. Our lives do not overlap the way they used to. That is not a tragedy, it is just what happens when people grow in different directions. The friendship survived, it just changed shape. Nan Joyce is 84 now and still going. She moved into a supported living facility last year, and I helped coordinate her aged care assessment through the aged care system. She told the facility staff that her granddaughter was an OT and had set the whole thing up personally. The staff told me later that she had mentioned it approximately 11 times in the first week. I am 32 years old. I am a senior occupational therapist working with NDIS participants in Brisbane. I earn $91,000 a year. I own my home. I have a full life in a city I chose deliberately. I'm currently studying toward a graduate certificate in paediatric OT because there is a significant shortage of OTs specialising in children with developmental conditions, and I want to be part of closing that gap. The notebook on my desk right now has a list of paediatric assessment tools I am working through, same as it ever was. I think about Michelle sometimes, the OT who came to my Nan's house twice a week and helped her get her life back. I think about what it meant to watch that happen when I was 17. I think about the fact that she did not know she was changing the direction of my life by just doing her job well. You never know who is watching you. You never know what a small, careful act of competence might set in motion in someone else. Do the work well. That is the whole thing. If you are in a regional town right now and you are looking at a future that feels like it has already been decided for you, I want you to know it has not. The TAFE pathway is real. HECS means you do not need money up front for university. The jobs at the end of this road are needed everywhere in this country, and they pay well and they matter.
Find the library, ask questions. The path is there, you just have to start walking it.